Hey, would you look at that? Another batch of recruits, and wow, is that a human? Commander Vex leaned forward in his hover chair, his 6 eyes blinking in rapid succession. What is Central Command thinking? Humans don't belong in the Galactic Elite Academy. I shifted uncomfortably beside him. As his administrative assistant, I was required to attend these arrival ceremonies, but I never enjoyed Vex's commentary. Sir, Central Command must have their reasons. Reasons? Please, Zork. Humans are barely spacefaring. They're fragile, emotional, and lack any natural defenses. That one won't last a week. He pointed one clawed appendage toward a small figure standing at the far end of the line. The human female I checked my datapad, Myra Kowalski, stood out dramatically among the other recruits. Where the Draxians had their armored exoskeletons, the Voltar twins had their telepathic capabilities, and even the Quarna boy had his chameleon-like skin. The human appeared ordinary, small, vulnerable. 10 credits says she's gone by evaluation day. Vex chuckled, his mandibles clicking in that way that always made my scales itch. That's against Academy regulations, sir. I reminded him, though we both knew he'd find someone to take that bet. The orientation proceedings droned on, with Academy Director Phobos making the same speech he'd made for the last 27 cycles. I found my attention repeatedly drawn to the human. Unlike the other new recruits who stood at rigid attention, she was constantly moving, shifting her weight, tucking her brown hair behind her rounded ears, scanning the grand hall with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Interesting. 3 days later, team assignments were posted. As expected, the human was placed in Omega Squad, the designation traditionally reserved for those expected to wash out. I'd seen it happen countless times. Omega Squad always received the least resources, the worst training slots, and the most challenging assignments. Classic Phobos, Vex said, reviewing the assignments on his monitor. Put all the rejects together and watch them fail. That way, when they do, you can say you gave them a chance. I nodded absently, but something about the human's placement bothered me. I'd been monitoring her performance in preliminary assessments, and while she lacked the physical prowess of the Draxians or the natural abilities of other species, her problem-solving metrics were off the charts. Why place such a mind in Omega? Sir, the human's cognitive scores mean nothing, Vex interrupted. This is the Elite Academy, not some theory school. Combat performance is what matters, and that human couldn't win a physical confrontation with a baby Zorgon, let alone a trained Draxian. Maybe he was right. But that evening, as I passed the training arenas on my way home, I noticed the lights still on in Training Room 12, the smallest, most outdated facility, typically assigned to Omega Squad. Curiosity got the better of me. Through the observation window, I saw Myra Kowalski alone in the room, surrounded by holographic opponents. What caught my attention wasn't her fighting style, which was, admittedly, unimpressive by Academy standards, but her methodical approach. She wasn't training randomly. She was systematically testing the simulation parameters, methodically cataloging the response patterns of different enemy types. I muttered to myself. That's different. A week later, the first team assessment results were posted. As expected, Alpha Squad dominated, with the Draxian twins, Krell and Vrel, setting new records in the combat simulator. What wasn't expected? Omega Squad coming in 4th. Not last. 4th. This has to be an error, Vex sputtered, staring at the rankings. Omega has never finished above last place in initial assessments. Never. I checked the data myself. No error, sir. They scored exceptionally well in the strategic component, making up for lower physical combat scores. Vex's facial tentacles curled in irritation. Pull the individual performance metrics. I did, and what they showed was fascinating. While most teams had 1 or 2 standout performers carrying the group, Omega's success came from perfect complementary performance. Each member had performed precisely to their strengths, with minimal overlap and maximum efficiency. The human, I said, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. She's their strategist. Impossible, Vex hissed. No first year could coordinate a team that effectively, especially not a human. But the evidence was right there in the data. Somehow, in just 1 week, Mira Kowalski had assessed the strengths and weaknesses of her misfit team and developed strategies that played to each member's abilities while covering their vulnerabilities. Sir, I ventured, perhaps we should observe their next training session. 2 days later, we stood in the observation booth above training room 12, watching Omega Squad prepare for their session. The team was an unlikely collection. Besides the human, there was Grunk, a Boglodyte with incredible strength but famously poor coordination, Trixie, a Lumidarian whose light manipulation abilities were impressive but whose physical form was extremely fragile, Plex, a Mechaloid with exceptional technical skills but sluggish mobility, and Raza, a Kintari whose precognitive flashes were valuable but unpredictable. What a disaster of a team composition, Vex muttered. Phobos really stacked the deck against them. The training sequence began a standard hostage extraction scenario. Normally, teams approach this with brute force or obvious tactical maneuvers. Omega neither. What are they doing? Vex leaned forward, his multiple eyes narrowing. I watched, increasingly fascinated, as the team executed a strategy I'd never seen before. Grunk wasn't being used as a frontline combatant as his species typically would be. Instead, he was providing mobile cover for Trixie, who was using her light manipulation to create distractions and illusions. Plex was bypassing security systems while being protected by both, and Raza called out periodic warnings that allowed the team to adjust their movements with uncanny precision. And at the center of it all was Mira, coordinating through hand signals and brief vocal commands, constantly repositioning her team members for maximum effectiveness. This is unorthodox, I said. Vex didn't respond. For once in his long career, my supervisor seemed speechless. When Omega completed the scenario with a time that put them second only to Alpha Squad, Vex's mandibles clicked rapidly, his species equivalent of a nervous twitch. A fluke, he declared finally. They got lucky with the scenario parameters. But I wasn't so sure. As the team exited the training room, I noticed how they clustered around Mira, their body language showing something rare in the hyper-competitive academy environment, to genuine respect and camaraderie. Permission to investigate further, sir? I asked. Vex waved a dismissive claw. Fine. Find out how they're cheating. I didn't believe they were cheating, but I was intensely curious. Over the next few weeks, I observed Omega Squad whenever my duties allowed. What I saw challenged everything I thought I knew about effective team dynamics in the academy. Most squads trained together but lived separate lives. Omega, however, seemed inseparable. They ate together, studied together, and even spent recreation time as a unit. More surprisingly, they seemed to genuinely enjoy each other's company. One evening I followed them to the academy library, a vast, typically empty space since most students preferred to access information via their neural interfaces. Omega had claimed a corner table surrounded by actual physical books and diagrams. No, Grunk. You're thinking like a Boglodyte again, I heard Mira say as I pretended to browse nearby shelves. You don't need to smash through the barrier. If Trixie creates a light distortion here and here, she pointed to a diagram, the sensors will read it as solid mass. They'll never expect someone of your size to slip through what looks like a tiny gap. Grunk's massive brow furrowed, but Grunk's strongest. Grunk's smash is safest. Strongest doesn't always win, Mira replied, not unkindly. Remember the Ralcon scenario. You tried to smash and got tagged by simulation darts within seconds. Grunk, remember, the huge alien admitted, somewhat sheepishly. Grunk itched for days. Exactly. But when you used Plex's tactical cloak and surprised them, you were amazing. The Boglodyte's normally fierce expression softened. Grunk was sneaky? The sneakiest, Mira confirmed with a grin. And they never saw it coming because nobody expects a Boglodyte to be subtle. I was so engrossed in their conversation that I didn't notice Raza, the Kintari, had moved to stand beside me until she spoke. "You've been watching us for 17 days now, Administrator Zork." I nearly dropped my datapad in surprise. Official observation is part of my duties." Raza's silver eyes regarded me steadily. "Your interest exceeds professional obligation. You're curious." Before I could formulate a response, Mira called out from the table. "Why don't you join us, Administrator? You'll see more from over here than hiding behind the xenobiology shelves." Awed and somewhat embarrassed, I approached their table. "I'm not hiding. I'm gathering data on squad performance for official Academy records." 5 pairs of eyes regarded me with varying degrees of skepticism. "Right," Mira said, in that peculiar human way that suggested she didn't believe me at all. "Well, while you're gathering data, you might as well be comfortable. Pull up a chair. We're just strategizing for tomorrow's assessment." Against my better judgment, I sat. "Why strategy?" I asked. "Most teams focus on combat drills and physical conditioning." Plex, the mechaloid, emitted a series of clicks that translated as laughter. "Because we can't outfight Alpha Squad. Have you seen the Draxian twins? They bench press shuttlecraft for fun. But we can outthink them," Mira added. "They're predictable. Strong, yes. Skilled, absolutely. But they approach every problem the same way. Frontal assault, overwhelming force." Trixie chimed in, her luminescent skin pulsing with blue light. "It works for them because they're strong enough to overcome most obstacles." "But not all obstacles," Mira pointed out. "That's where we have the advantage. We know we can't win with brute force, so we have to get creative." I found myself nodding. Adaptive problem solving versus raw power. Exactly. Mira beamed at me as though I'd just said something brilliant instead of merely stating the obvious. "And each of us brings something unique to the table, abilities the others don't have. Which is why we study each other," Grunk added, surprising me with his insight. "Grunk know what Trixie do. Trixie know what Grunk do. We cover what word? Weaknesses," Raza provided. "Yes, we cover weaknesses. Make teams strong where each alone is weak." I looked around the table at these 5 misfits who by all Academy standards should have been washing out, not rising through the ranks. "This approach is unorthodox." "You mean it's human," Mira said, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to. It's what everyone thinks. Humans don't have natural armor or telepathy or super strength. We're the weakest species in the Academy, physically speaking. But, boss." She tapped her temple. "We've survived because we're adaptable. We observe. We plan. We find ways to turn weaknesses into strengths. Just as you're doing with your team," I realized aloud. "Just as we're doing together," she corrected. "This isn't my team. It's our team." The others nodded in agreement, and I saw something in their expressions I rarely witnessed at the Academy, pride not in individual achievement, but in collective success. For the first time, I began to wonder if perhaps the Academy's traditional approach to team building might be flawed. The midterm assessments arrived, and with them, unprecedented results. Omega Squad placed second overall, missing first place by mere points. The Academy was buzzing with rumors and speculation. How had the Reject Squad risen so quickly? Cheating was the most common theory, followed closely by some sort of human mind control, a ridiculous notion given human biological limitations, but fear rarely follows logic. Vex was apoplectic. "This is unacceptable. They're making a mockery of the Academy's traditions." "By succeeding?" I asked, unable to keep a hint of sarcasm from my voice. "By succeeding in the wrong way." Vex slammed a claw on his desk. "The Academy has protocols, procedures, proven methodologies, which clearly aren't as effective as we thought," I pointed out, immediately regretting my boldness. Vex's eyes narrowed. "You've been spending time with them. Don't think I haven't noticed. Your objectivity is compromised, Zork." He was right, of course. My curiosity about Omega had evolved into genuine admiration. Over the past weeks, I'd moved from observer to occasional advisor, sharing insights about academy protocols that might give them an edge. I told myself it was in the interest of fair competition, but in truth, I was invested in their success. "Director Phobos wants to see you," Vex said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a positive development. "Apparently, he has questions about your recent activities." My scales prickled with anxiety. Being summoned by the director was rarely good news. Director Phobos was an imposing figure, a Chronosian who had served as academy director for over 2 centuries. His species aged at a fraction of the rate of most galactics, giving him a perspective that spanned multiple generations of officers. "Administrator Zork," he greeted me, his deep voice resonating in the sparsely furnished office. "I understand you've developed an interest in Omega Squad." "I've been monitoring all teams, sir, as per my duties." "Come now, let's not pretend. Your access logs show you've spent 3 times as many hours observing Omega as any other squad. You've been seen in their company during off hours. You've even provided them with insider information about academy protocols." I swallowed nervously. "Sir, He held up a hand, stopping my explanation. "I'm not concerned about your fraternization, Administrator. I'm interested in your assessment of them, particularly the human." This wasn't what I expected. "My assessment?" "Yes, you've watched them closely. What do you see that others might miss?" I considered my words carefully. "They function as a true unit, sir. Not simply as skilled individuals working toward the same goal, but as complementary parts of a whole. The human Mira. She's identified the unique strengths and limitations of each team member and developed strategies that maximize their collective effectiveness." "And what of the traditional academy methods? The emphasis on individual excellence and standardized tactical approaches?" "They wouldn't work for Omega. They lack the conventional advantages that those methods were designed to enhance." Phobos nodded slowly. "So they adapted, created a new system better suited to their specific composition." "Yes, sir. Just as humans have done throughout their brief history," he said, almost to himself. "Fascinating species. Physically unimpressive, yet they've survived challenges that have wiped out more advanced civilizations." I remained silent, uncertain where this conversation was heading. "Do you know why I placed the human in Omega Squad, Administrator?" "I assumed it was because of her physical limitations, sir." Phobos made a sound that might have been a laugh. "I've been director of this academy for 217 years. In that time, I've seen countless species come through our doors. The strongest, the fastest, the most naturally gifted warriors in the galaxy." He paused. "And yet, our most successful graduates aren't always the ones with the most impressive natural abilities." He rose from his desk and moved to the window overlooking the training grounds. "The Galactic Defense Force doesn't need officers who can win only when conditions are ideal. We need officers who can adapt, who can make the best use of whatever resources are available, who can turn apparent disadvantages into unexpected strengths." Understanding dawned on me. "You put her in Omega Squad deliberately, with the others who had abilities that didn't fit the Academy's standard approach." "I gave her a challenge," he corrected. "One that would either break her or prove my theory correct." "And has it? Proven your theory?" Phobos turned back to me, his ancient eyes glinting. "That remains to be seen. The final assessments will tell us whether Omega's rise is sustainable or merely a fascinating anomaly." "You sound like you want them to succeed," I ventured. "What I want, Administrator Zork, is for this academy to produce the best officers possible. If that means rethinking our methods, then so be it." As I left the director's office, I realized that Omega Squad's success wasn't just changing their own futures, it might be changing the future of the academy itself. The final assessment was the impossible scenario, a simulation famously designed to be unwinnable. Its purpose was not to test if cadets could achieve victory, but how they handled inevitable defeat. The entire academy gathered to watch the top teams attempt the challenge. Alpha Squad went first, with Krell and Vrel leading a ferocious assault that, while impressive and ultimately ended in failure, as the simulation's overwhelming forces gradually wore them down. When Omega's turn came, whispers swept through the observation deck. Many had come to see the upstart team finally put in their place. Vex stood beside me, practically vibrating with anticipation of their failure. "Now we'll see the humans' true limitations," he muttered. The scenario began, and immediately Omega did something unexpected. Rather than engaging the enemy forces directly or attempting to complete the primary objective, they appeared to be retreating. "Hey, running away already?" Someone in the crowd jeered. But they weren't retreating randomly. They were executing a carefully choreographed withdrawal, drawing the simulation enemies into a narrowing corridor where Grunk and Trixie had prepared an elaborate trap. When it was sprung, nearly a third of the opposing force was neutralized in seconds. "Interesting opening gambit," Director Phobos commented from nearby, "but the scenario compensates for early losses by increasing the difficulty of remaining forces." Sure enough, the simulation ramped up, introducing elite enemy units with adaptive tactical programming. This was where most teams faltered, as their initial strategies became ineffective. Omega, however, seemed prepared for this. They split into pairs, Miro with Raza, Grunk with Trixie, while Plex operated independently, each executing what appeared to be completely different tactical approaches that nonetheless worked in concert. "They're confusing the simulation's predictive algorithms," I realized aloud. "It can't anticipate their next move because there's no single pattern to analyze." The crowd grew silent as Omega continued to progress through the scenario, reaching checkpoints that few teams ever saw. They weren't winning, exactly. The simulation was designed to ensure that wasn't possible. But they were lasting longer and accomplishing more objectives than any team in recent memory. Finally, they reached the scenario's infamous final chamber, a room with multiple hostages, numerous enemy combatants, and a countdown to catastrophic failure. It was designed as a classic no-win scenario where saving the hostages meant failing the primary mission objective, and vice versa. "Now they'll have to choose," Vex said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "No team has ever managed to save both the hostages and complete the primary objective." On the simulation floor, I watched as Mira gathered her team for a brief huddle. When they broke, each moved with purpose, but not toward either the hostages or the primary objective. Instead, they targeted the room's infrastructure, support columns, power conduits, communication arrays. "What are they doing?" someone asked. "Changing the parameters of the scenario," Director Phobos answered, his voice carrying a note of something I'd never heard from him before, surprise. Within minutes, Omega had caused a controlled collapse of part of the chamber, creating a safe passage for the hostages while simultaneously exposing the primary objective. Grunk provided cover while Trixie guided the hostages to safety, Plex and Raza secured the objective, and Mira coordinated the entire operation from a central position. When the simulation ended, the final score flashed on the main display. Objectives completed, 93%, the highest score ever recorded in the impossible scenario. The observation deck erupted in a mixture of cheers, protests, and shocked exclamations. Vex stood motionless beside me, his mandibles hanging slack in disbelief. "How?" he finally managed. "How did they do that?" "They didn't try to win the unwinnable scenario," I said, understanding dawning. "They changed it into a winnable one." The graduation ceremony 2 weeks later was unlike any in Academy history. For the first time, Omega Squad stood on the highest platform, having earned the top overall ranking through their unprecedented performance in the final assessments. Director Phobos addressed the assembled cadets and officers with his traditional speech about excellence and tradition, but then deviated into unexpected territory. For generations, this academy has trained the finest officers in the galaxy by emphasizing certain qualities we believed essential to leadership: physical prowess and tactical aggression, individual excellence. This year, however, we have been reminded of an essential truth. There is no single path to greatness. His gaze settled on Omega Squad, standing proud in their newly earned elite uniforms. True strength lies not in conforming to a predetermined model of success, but but in recognizing and leveraging the unique capabilities of each individual to create something greater than the sum of its parts. In this, Omega Squad has not merely succeeded, they have excelled. As Mira Kowalski stepped forward to receive the squad commander's insignia, the first human to ever do so, I caught her eye and offered a small nod of congratulation. She smiled in return, a gesture that conveyed both gratitude and something else, vindication, perhaps. Later at the reception, I found her alone for a moment on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "Congratulations, Squad Commander," I said, joining her. "You've accomplished something truly remarkable." "Thank you, Administrator Zork, though I can't take all the credit. It was truly a team effort, indeed. But it was your vision that brought that team together, that helped them see past their perceived limitations." She smiled. "I just helped them see what was already there. Everyone has strengths, Administrator. Sometimes they're just not the strengths that others value or recognize." "A very human perspective," I observed. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just common sense that got lost in tradition." She turned to look at me directly. "You know they're changing the Academy training protocols because of us? Director Phobos is implementing new team-building methodologies based on our approach." I heard. Vex is not pleased. We both laughed at that understatement. "Change is difficult," Mira acknowledged, "especially for institutions as old as the Academy. But necessary. Like forcing a human girl into last place, only to have her build the strongest team the Academy has ever seen," I suggested. Her eyes widened slightly. "You figured it out, didn't you? That Phobos placed me in Omega deliberately? He as much as told me. A test, he called it, of your adaptability. And of the Academy's," Mira added. "He wanted to see if success could come from unexpected places, in unexpected forms." I nodded. "A risky experiment." "The best ones always are." She gazed back out at the stars. "That's where humans excel, you know. Not because we're the strongest or the fastest or the most naturally gifted, but because we're willing to try new approaches, to adapt when traditional methods fail, to find strength in unlikely places." "A valuable lesson for us all," I admitted. "One worth remembering as we head out there." She gestured toward the vast expanse of space before us.